Chapter 5. It was a fairly crowded car, if I'm being honest. William and Rebecca were fine, taking the front 2 seats. Fauve, however, was smushed between Bosun and Byron. They both took their responsibility for protecting her very seriously. You may be wondering why that is. Well, the threats had tapered off quite a bit. The very public trials, the jail sentences, or the simulated punishments did quite a bit to dull the nerves of hostile people. But every now and then, for all the verve and vigor she showed, I sometimes caught a hint that something new came in. Our other 2 guards, of whom I have written little, were little written of precisely because they often paid visits to those responsible. Fauve would forward a message, say it was nothing, but then our guards would be reduced for hours or even days. Then they would be back again. I was not privy to the nature of what was said, and to my shame I was too cowardly to ask. But whatever it was, Bosun and Byron knew. They knew and did not like it. As such, when we traveled together, she had at least one hulking guardian with her. But just now she was a trifles mushed between them. My sister took a place by the door, and at the suggestion of Rebecca, Captain Bonnie Red chose to seat herself in the most logical place. She seemed quite surprised that the captain agreed. But then again, Dlamacens are a practical lot, and short of the trunk, there weren't any other options if we were all going to share a car. So Bonnie Red claimed the only reasonably available space there was, my lap. The one bothersome thing about it was, she left her hat on. I did ask her why, but she said according to the musical artists of Earth, a woman should always leave her hat on. To this day I do not know what she was talking about. She refused to apologize or explain or apologize for not explaining, but every now and then I would tell the story, and some human would find it utterly hilarious, and likewise refuse to explain. Suffice it to say that the hat was oversized and blocked my view of the road, and I will admit her tale felt quite good. Life on Earth is full of little trade-offs. We, by which I mean the Dlamacens in the car, were well aware we were drawing close to the food before the humans were. The city of Louisville has always had a reputation for good food and great variety. Even centuries before the present, it was a unique international place within an otherwise quiet and insular state. Nowhere is this more evident than in their dining. I previously wrote about the omnivorous nature of humans, but since I must be honest for the record, I had very little experience with it. I tried a handful of dishes at the university dining facility, and I have had the occasional pastry at the Heine Brothers coffee shop, but on the whole I preferred Rebecca or William's cooking. I suppose I just wasn't that adventurous. I also didn't really realize what I was missing. The endless variety of cultural contributions combined into a sea of smells that besieged our senses as the car took us deeper into the city. Like most major cities, this one had what might be simply referred to as a food strip or restaurant district. Simply put, if your food can't make it there, it certainly can't make it somewhere else. As a major transportation hub, the airlines constantly brought new customers into the city, and most restaurants of any means made sure the travelers knew where to find them. Those with fewer means had young people standing outside with food samples or signs, greeters encouraging customers to walk inside. With our sensitive noses, every kind of spice and herb we never knew existed was assaulting our senses. Human cars were not very good for allowing our tails to express happiness, but that did not stop them from trying. The place we chose to eat had been an established part of barbecue dining in Louisville since the 21st century, and I had been dying to try it ever since the first evening escorting the crew of the Red Spark out. When one of their drunken crew members and their military escort stumbled back to formation slathered in sweet barbecue sauce that probably took hours to clean out of her fur. The establishment, Baby Backs, was a family affair. You may have noticed this routine nepotistic habit of humans. Teresa took over her grandfather's business, and while she mentored Fauve, I fully expected that she would pass the business on to a relative of her own. Mavis was learning from her father how to take on the role of a coach for the Cardinals football team. Percival's son joined his business with intent to one day inherit it. So it was with the restaurant business, this one in particular. The family which ran it carried it on through good times and bad for hundreds of years, down into the present, and became an institution in its own right. The odd dynamic of human nature is such that while they love the new to the point of being mad for it, they also steep themselves in traditions, protecting ancient historical sites, books, objects, and occasionally, even people. Yes, certain people were designated as treasures because of their skills in particular arts. In Japan, it was the ability to create certain dyes. In France, it was a family of winemakers. In this particular city, a single chef was designated to be a treasure for his ability to prepare food in a long, long tradition. And that was where I was taking us. Was it perhaps unethical to use university money on an extravagant evening out on the basis that it was research? You could argue perhaps that it was. You could also argue that it was my own petty revenge at my department for considering recalling me and taking me away from my family, and thus causing us all to worry. I dare say that it was comeuppance, and perhaps a little bit of assimilation into my new home, that led to my decision to have one extravagant evening out on expensive barbecue. Either way, I was looking forward to it, and, since I am forced to be completely honest, and I know she will not object, I suppose I didn't mind being a seat for at least a little while. Chapter 6. To say we were excited to eat would be an understatement. Barbecue was a favorite North American customary food, and as such, you could find restaurants featuring it almost everywhere. A little bit about human dining habits before we feature the events of the restaurant itself. Humans are an exceptionally social species, and as such dining alone is seen as inherently sad, even when the person doing it is actually content with their life. Eating alone is seen as indicative of loneliness or unhappiness, and even today, if you observe their films, if a director or storyteller wants to show that someone is lonely or a loner, they will almost always show the subject eating by themselves. Food is social, and as near as I can tell, always has been. Food is a sign of safety, as people do not typically eat when in danger unless they have no choice. Food is a sign of luxury or poverty. What people eat shows what they have access to, and what they have access to grows or shrinks based on their access. Even on the modern earth there are differences to be found, but I had yet to learn how much so. We arrived at the parking lot and slid out of our seats. The parking area was nearly full, but this was to be expected. It was a Friday evening after all, and even though work schedules for humans were flexible, certain hours were generally expected that the vast majority of people would be off. This ties back into their socialized natures. While it isn't uncommon for Dlamacens to eat together, on my homeworld this was purely about efficiency. You ate, you got back to work. You were allotted the equivalent of 30 minutes to consume what you needed to, and then return to your tasks as fast as possible. The large meals we consumed existed only because it was more efficient if everybody ate at once, and if all the sustenance was in the same place. Taking joy in eating? Actually spending resources on just making it enjoyable? The long socialization of a 2-hour dinner just talking and savoring one course after another? Despite months on Earth, this was proving to be as hard to adjust to as it was delightful to learn. We entered with wagging tails for the Dlamacens and hungry bellies for us all. The rich smell of barbecue sauce and smoked meat was so heavy that I would swear that even if we'd stuffed our noses, we would still have smelled it. We made our way through the sea of booths and tables, guided by a woman who, to put it simply, would have fit well on the football team, but had a smile on her dark skin that was as bright as day. "Hey y'all, welcome to Bobby Bucks," she said, and led us with a confident saunter that could have belonged to either an assertive soldier or a confident cheerleader. She led us to a long table with enough chairs to spare, but I really didn't notice anyone or anything except, of course, for my sister. Bao's tongue was lolling out as she stared at the food, and I noticed that the way she walked had a kind of almost frantic urgency. She would have overtaken the server if the woman hadn't taken up the better part of the pathway, and might have tried to do it if there had been a chance of getting the food one moment sooner by doing so. "How long since you've had a full meal?" Bonnie asked her as we sat down, and the server said, "I'll be back with your bread and some water to start. Go ahead and place your orders as soon as y'all are ready." She gave us all a warm round of smiles and politely left us to converse with each other. Bonnie wasn't the size of Boatswain or Byron, but like most scouts of the Dlamacen military, she had undergone modification. Like humans, our people learned a long time ago that big people tend to survive more fights than short people, and part of the modification process for our military includes a little fiddling with their genetics. This meant that Bonnie grew a full head taller than my sister, so my sister looked up at her and said, "Is it that obvious?" "Yes. I live on a ship that spends months at a time in the void. Even with modification to reduce our food needs, we still have to ration. Sometimes we have to ration a lot." "So, how long?" Bonnie explained, and Bao put her hand over her belly as it rumbled. "Since I got to Earth. I live in the ruins of what used to be Chicago," Bao said, and the humans at the table stared at her in open disbelief. "You can't be serious," William asked. "No way, that's gotta be a joke. Isn't the radiation there deadly?" Rebecca asked, and pursed her lips for a moment before she clucked her tongue and said, "It's not nice to make jokes about that. A lot of humans died there. It's just a radioactive grave now. I'm not joking. And yes, there are still people there. Winning their trust has not been easy." Bao answered, and the table was quiet for a moment, just as the waitress returned and set down several bright red baskets full of golden bread that looked as if it had been baked already slathered in butter. Beside each basket, she set down several small glass bowls with a scoop to add yet more butter to it, and then she began placing cups filled with ice water down by each of us. "Y'all just push the button on your table if you need something before you're ready to order," she said, and left us alone again. The button she referred to was on the little screen which sat in front of every seat at the table that we would use to select our meals for the evening. Bao was already going through her screen, panting with hunger while we spoke. "That's not exactly true," Byron said, contradicting Rebecca. "The radiation levels have been decreasing for years, though I'll be damned if I know how people could be living there long enough to see that happen." "The same reason I was able to survive there," Bao answered. The answer clicked for Bonnie Red immediately. "You were modified. What was your designated career before you ran off?" "I was an RGC specialist." Bao said it as if that should mean something to the rest of us. "Radioactive gene control specialist. My job was to work with radiation to induce mutation in biological life, to find useful ones that we could use for general improvement of our species. All of us were modified to make us resistant to radiation as a safety precaution. And before you ask, no, I did not like the work." Bao explained her speciality, and I saw expressions of understanding dawn on others. Fauve, though, had questions of her own. "That sounds interesting. Why didn't you like it?" "Because I had to work on biological life," Bao explained. "Like plants and simple cells?" Fauve asked. The Dlamacins at the table were silent. "Like plants and multicells then, right?" Fauve pressed. Bao's silent stare was answer enough. Chapter 7. Fauve's face paled. There was nothing left of them, if that matters. They were brain dead, kept alive on machines. Bao explained it clinically. "I won't say the work was without value. We saved many lives, and all the gene modifications that made our military the most feared one in the galaxy came out of people doing my job." She felt the judgment of the table, and I think if she hadn't been as hungry as she was, she might have left. I didn't want to. I didn't like the work, but it was where I was assigned. Even doing it to living bodies. Fauve cut her off. "People. The word you're looking for is people." She informed my sister, and Bao, to her credit, nodded. "Yes, people. You humans don't understand. You're new to the galaxy. But ask him." She pointed to Bosun. "Ask her." She pointed to Bonnie Red. Heads swiveled back and forth between the pair. It wasn't lost to my awareness that she hadn't pointed at me, but it was something I could address later. "The Zenti aren't the only threats out there," Bosun finally admitted. "Evolved prey might not often have the fortitude for space travel, but that does not mean they're all weak like the Maxiki. The peace we have now, it wasn't always so. Dlamacins live a long time, so we remember wars that are ancient history to you." "It's not that it's meant to be cruel," Bonnie added as she placed her order. "It's just that we live our whole lives protecting the species. If you get old enough and eventually can't contribute, they give you the long rest. You get put to sleep on a table, and then your body is used to continue to help protect Dlamius. It started, 1,200-odd years ago? A long time before we were born, at least. For some, it's the closest they get to immortality, since their names are added to the list of contributors to the life of Dlamius." Bonnie's words may have sounded as if she were defending the work, but the way she said it, the way she finished, with her eyes gone hard and her teeth exposed a little longer than was polite, I could feel her general disgust. "Is it really that bad out there?" William asked. "It can be," Byron remarked. "I went out a few times after the thing with Teresa's parents. There are a lot of no-man's lands out there between species. And there are plenty like the Zenti, who are quick to fill those gaps and raid on either side of it, counting on the fear each side of the border has for the other to get away with it. And from what I saw, this is considered peaceful and stable. What I saw, though, it reminds me of the history lessons of the 20th to 22nd century power games." "I remember that," Fauve said with a snap of her fingers. "Countries would give a bunch of weapons and money to little powers just to stir up trouble for their bigger enemies. That's about the size of it," Bonnie Red replied. "Smart girl. A long time ago, though, things were a lot worse. I guess it was bad enough that we started doing what we did, and have just been doing it ever since. Until right just now, I never really thought about it being all that different." "It could still be that way again," Bosun said, contradicting her at once. "Dlamius is a superpower. Earth has seeded more worlds in the last 50 years than most species do in 500. The Zenti were humbled enough to talk peace, but victory creates fear too. The galaxy is a scary place if you don't have people you can trust around you. And there's a lot of fear of you all now too," he said while looking straight at William and Rebecca. "Us?" they said and put their hands on their chests at the same time. "Humans," Bosun answered. "Your technology is almost on par with species that haven't changed much in 600 years. You recovered from a horrendous war that should have set you back by 1,000 years and did it in less than 100. And everybody knows about your utter disregard for your own safety. He and Bonnie Red wagged their tails enthusiastically. One of your best qualities, if you want my opinion, Bonnie added with a series of rapid nods. Your species really lives. You don't just trudge toward death like so many others. Maybe we've just remembered the worst times so much we don't even know things can actually be any better. But her job, she pointed toward Bao, is just a reflection of that. Wait, where's the pirate talk? Fauve asked. Aye, lass, was you fond of the way I was a-wordin' things? Bonnie asked, her tongue lolling out as she panted in what was probably her attempt at imitating human laughter. I turned on my translator, Bonnie explained, but I can turn it off if you like the pirate in me so much. Let's not for the moment, William interjected before Fauve could agree, and she pouted for a moment while she placed her order. It wasn't cruel to them, Bao said, returning focus to her former work. Their lives were empty enough as it was. They volunteered for it because it was all over for them anyway. But I hated it. I hated that I was good at it, and I got out of it as soon as I could. Forgive my interruption, sister of mine, I said, as I finally finished placing my order. But I have to ask, how? You don't just walk off the job on Delamius. You have to apply for permission to quit and gain reassignment. If you were good at your job, there's no way they'd have let you leave. Bao looked over at me, her hands placed one over the other on the table surface. She didn't look at me with anger, which was a first for her as far as I knew. I didn't even detect any anger pheromones, which I have to admit was another unexpected change. Then, after she gathered her thoughts, she said, First I had to want to go, to know I wanted to leave, that I wanted something different, better. And as much as I hate to admit it, I got the opportunity thanks to you, brother of mine. But the desire? The desire came from her. She inclined her head toward Captain Bonnie Red, and the silent confusion at the table was loud as thunder to the table. Chapter 8. The only dark I like to be left in is the void of space, Bonnie said, drumming her fingers on the table. It was a very human gesture. It said something about how much she'd assimilated. For those shorter-lived species, you must understand, a Dlamisa is naturally very patient. We have time. We don't have to rush. We do things efficiently because it is necessary, but as long as we know something is being done as efficiently as it can be, we tend not to be impatient about it. But for humans, everything must be bigger, better, stronger, faster. Everything is rushed and hasty, and if it is as fast as it can go, well, they will always ask, how do we make it faster? I rather like that trait, but it took a long time to get used to. Bonnie, however, seemed to have gotten used to it long before we met, and as such, she was used to a degree of haste most of us simply were not. Hence, the oddity of the drumming fingers. She did not, however, have to wait very long. I also attended the university, but for my work. While there, I was browsing the data library footage for Xeno actions, and came across footage that hadn't been properly sorted. Footage that you left behind, Bao explained, and Bonnie jumped to the obvious conclusion. The pirate movies? She asked. No, Bao answered. The footage of your encounter with humans. I then pulled the data you drew off of. That was when I found your pirate movies. They looked so free, so utterly and completely free. No probing over bodies that are dead in all but name, no constantly being tired, no endless parade of reports, no... Bao swallowed the lump in her throat that I don't think she noticed until she had to get rid of it. I tried to switch jobs, to go into Terran studies, but you, little brother, beat me to it. Axlith chose you over me, but that didn't stop me from studying. That didn't stop me from learning. And... Her ears all went back. I may not be as smart as you are, but ambition counts for something too. She closed her hand into a fist. And even if you did beat me here, you also gave me the opportunity. I suggested I pay a visit to a system I found out that the Red Spark frequented, faked a report from you since I had your family ID, pretending you'd sent a sample for pickup. Got myself a ship off-world, and used my saved-up credits to buy passage to the Red Spark's port instead. Then I was free. Bao sighed long and loud and leaned back in her seat. I never felt better than the day I saw my homeworld shrink into a dot and disappear. I didn't even know I was that unhappy. I didn't even really have words for it until I learned enough of Terran languages. She glanced out of the corner of her eye toward me. I want to study humans, to learn how anyone can be this free, this happy, and still get anywhere with their lives. I'm convinced that if I can find the answer to this, Not only will I be able to get a pardon for abandonment of my duty and travel anywhere again, but that I'll make it so our whole species will be better off for it. We were all quiet at the table, and to put it lightly, I was surprised by literally all of this. Job abandonment is a serious crime when you're in government employ, and everybody in her position was in the government's employ. My sister had made herself a fugitive after a proxy encounter with humans. I have said many times in many ways that humans can have a significant impact on our species. The security forces got drunk for one night with their human counterparts and stayed in touch. The logs I reviewed from Bonnie Red showed that she still had some quiet communications with the human ship's captain, despite having only encountered him for a single day. I put my entire career on the line more than once and considered abandoning it all if they tried to make me leave. Not to mention the rest of Bonnie's crew had become instant celebrities on Earth. Bosun threw away a major opportunity for advancement because he would have had to leave Byron behind. For whatever reason, it seemed our species was just destined, even created to be entwined with one another, like we couldn't help but experience love. Now on top of all that, Bao turns herself fugitive just for a chance to live like a human and pursue some other dream that might very well be impossible. The more I learned, the more study I knew was needed. But in that moment, all I could think to say was, I'm not sure if I should say you're welcome or sorry or what here. Bao sat up straight again and looked over at me, directly into the eyes and said, or rather perhaps I should say, demanded. You don't need to say either, but what you do need to do is ask me why I came looking for you, dear brother. Any response or question from me was stifled by the sudden arrival of our server with heaping platters of food with steam rising like little clouds. There were golden fries, little strands of potatoes fried with various rich herbs that tantalized our nostrils and looked so crispy they might break open at the touch. Ears of golden corn slathered in white buttery sauce sat in metal foil where they'd baked in their juices. For myself, a full rack of ribs so sweet and tender-looking that if I'd lost all my teeth, I am sure I could have chewed them still. The meat threatened to fall off the very bone. And then came the beer, rich dark ale served at room temperature. Entire volumes could be written on the expansiveness of this feast that my university was so generously paying for, in no small part because there was simply so much of it to be had that we could scarcely see the table beneath our respective plates. Fauve eyed our beers enviously, but content with a non-alcoholic root variety, as it was enough to let us toast. We raised our glasses and Bonnie said, "To peace among worlds." Who could argue with that? So we answered it in that spirit, to peace among worlds. The glasses all clinked together as was custom for humans, and we then drank deeply before we began devouring in earnest. If our bellies could have been filled by the savory scent alone, they would have. The meat, though, would serve well enough. The way it all but melted on my tongue as I tore it from the bone and let it slide down my throat. A good meal truly is a paradise denied to my homeworld. Of course, that still left the question that Bao demanded that I ask of her. So when our server was gone, I broached it. Why did you come looking for me? It clearly wasn't out of some familial affection, even if you've learned human phrases about that sort of thing. Bao swallowed the bite of a fist-sized hamburger she'd ordered for herself, and paused her effort at busily ordering another, looked at me again and said, "To ask for your help. My humans are in trouble.